Good evening. Can you see this? Nakikita po?
Yes, Sir Rhochie.
Uh, would like to apologize for not preparing anong tawag dyan? A PowerPoint for this presentation. But I promise you this is gonna be brief and quick. As I will mention later, this is just a mere somehow being faithful to Kierkegaard is some kind of provoking some thoughts here, inculcating, soliciting ideas. It's not actually unaware of us what is happening today, present pandemic. So might as well. I was thinking, what could the philosopher Soren Kierkegaard can offer? So that's actually where I want to explore on. It's the paper is actually a work in progress. So kung meron kayong title, if you have title that you have in mind, later you might as well suggest it to me because again, this is not yet finished. Okay, so I'll just start. Oh wait, Sir Franz cannot actually connect. Ayan. So I'll start. Mm, okay. To sickness and to death, a Kierkegaardian reset and the time of pandemic. Before I proceed, Pangulo, is it clear? My audio is clear?
Yes, Sir Rhochie.
Oo. Yung vision, kita naman, no, the text. Is it moving? Okay.
Yes, it's moving. It's moving.
So I'll proceed. You can also, I can also send a copy of this, no, if you want to have a copy later. So I'll proceed now. Sickness unto death, a Kierkegaardian reset on the time of pandemic. Soren Kierkegaard is a 19th century the Danish philosopher and a religious writer. 6 years before his death, he wrote Sickness unto Death in the year 1849. In this work, he insists that being a Christian author is like a physician to someone sick in bed. For him, there is a greater disease that lures people. This is the kind of experience that we dread more than death itself. He describes, not even death is the sickness unto death, is the less everything which is called earthly and temporal suffering, want, sickness, wretchedness, affliction, adversities, torments, mental sufferings, sorrow, grief. And even if such things are so painful and hard to bear that we men say, the sufferer says, this is worse than death. Here he explains that the fear we experience today, such as anxiety, brought about by the loss of a job, of opportunities, the peace we find at home, we lost physical security, and even the fear of death is a mere symptom of a higher fear. The problem with this kind of fear is that, if not all, but most of us are unaware of it. This is because of its spiritual nature. Thus, for Kierkegaard, this is why it is worse than physical death. This fear that we are not afraid of is despair. Despair is itself the sickness unto death. In this paper, I will explore the Kierkegaardian notion of despair. Then, I'm sorry. Then I will try to make it relevant by offering a possible solution on how to cope up with the present pandemic. This will be short as I intend to open a discussion for other possible solutions from our friends and viewers listening right now for the sake of many who are in great need of psychological and spiritual support as they have succumbed to the claustrophobic conditions of our minds, most especially those who lost their loved ones due to this health crisis. In despair, we fear the loss of people around us. We are anxious about the lack of choices we make about things. This is most felt, I believe, during this time of quarantine. Why? Look at the terms. GCQ, General Community Quarantine, ECQ, Enhanced Community Quarantine. In some places, local authorities can even coin it as extreme ECQ, not to mention the term lockdown. By the term themselves, bring everyone to fear, kind of anxiety, dread, a depression, and ultimately hopelessness. Those friends of us here who are into psychology, clinical psychology, might as well help us explain the difference of those terms later. Before the quarantine, we dream of lying in bed and sleep all day. At work, we even steal 5 to 10 minutes just to obtain the much needed power nap. We wish to forget our work even for a day or two. For our colleagues, we wish to declare our research holiday. For the moms at home, the ultimate dream, which is an impossibility, is to skip monthly bills. Now that all this became a reality, we are left with no choices but to stay home. The food we stored and we craved so long has become a surfeit of food and drinks. The long hours of sleep became less and less. For tourists in destinations and cruise ships, their wanderlust turned into a curse. Our beloved heroes, the OFWs, are refused of arrivals and discriminated in their hometowns. Reunions and celebrations became a crime. Before, if anyone gets sick, your mother will watch over you. Now, a simple sneeze becomes a national threat. The worst pandemic in recent history is the Spanish flu, brought about by the H1N1 virus. Sorry. Mm, for a while. Okay, sorry for that. Can you see this? Um, Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Sorry. So I continue. Um, the worst pandemic in recent history is the Spanish flu, brought about by the H1N1 virus that recorded at least 50 million deaths in 1918. As of this writing, there are more than 380,600 deaths around the globe due to the novel coronavirus, according to Johns Hopkins Coronavirus Resource Center. Watching the figures and listening to the morose conditions of the patients, one cannot help but experience a sense of total fear, out of losing control of things around us. These, among others, bring us to despair, a sense of hopelessness in the world. This is what Kierkegaard is trying to caution us, since these are, according to him, only manifestations of greater concern. The symptoms mentioned are of material despair. This is distinct from spiritual despair. The first is akin to the notion of depression in the field of psychology, while the second is the spiritual, the reason why true despair is unknown to us. For Kierkegaard and the existential thinkers such as Albert Camus, Martin Heidegger, Gabriel Marcel, Jean-Paul Sartre, and among others, there are things in this world beyond our control. They are one with that. The interesting question now is how to approach this facticity of things. Each of them offered answers, but let us reserve that for the next Tasyo discussions. Now, going back, for Kierkegaard, the confusion of this approach is the root of despair. In a famous quotation in his book Sickness Unto Death, he defines man. He defines the nature of the human person as this way: man is a spirit, but what is spirit? Spirit is the self. But what is the self? The self is a relation which relates itself to its own self. Or it is that in the relation that the relation relates itself to its own self. The self is not the relation, but that the relation relates itself to its own self. Man is a synthesis of finite and of the infinite and the finite, of the temporal and the eternal, of freedom and necessity. In short, it is a synthesis. A synthesis is a relation between two factors. So regarded man is not yet a self. Okay, let me just apologize in behalf of Kierkegaard here because that's his manner of writing. But don't be intimidated by those words. No, that's why I put here. Apologies for the play of words, but that is truly how Kierkegaard writes as a reaction against the formalities of the treatises written during his time. But I would like to focus more on the word synthesis. A human person is composed of material and spiritual constitutes. There's nothing new here as far as the ancient medical philosophy's point of view of man is concerned. Yet the failure is to distinguish these two is the genesis of despair. Unfortunately, we are all victims of this. According to Kierkegaard, he even wrote a whole chapter in Sickness Unto Death, um, declaring that despair is universal. That is, what is despair? The material, the difficulty sets in. This lures more than the physical. This happens when we become over dependent on worldly matters and with other people. This could be our community, the society, even our religion, the religion we belong to. We are so engaged and immersed with the externalities, we forget that there is more essential to life. This is the spiritual virus infecting us without knowing it. This is because it is rooted from within. It is personal, meaning only an individual person who experiences it shall discover it too. As to how exactly, Kierkegaard turned silent and left it to ourselves how to interpret his works. Nevertheless, he left us some clues. Using Kierkegaardian diagnosis, one will find that we are afraid of dying, not because of death, but with the very thought that we are not prepared to leave the people and things most dear to us. It is neither the physical disease nor suffering that dread us most, but the unfinished business we have with this world. In the moment of death, the individual discovers his or her temporality, that is the brevity of life, as if saying, my existence is insignificant to be remembered by anyone. So let me ask, if despair is a spiritual disease, more unbearable than physical death, what then can cure it? Is there a vaccine that provides us with hope and spare us from such metaphysical contagion? It follows that the cure is also spiritual. This antidote is faith. Faith, however, must be personal. This is true with the COVID-19 survivors and those still who are fighting as we speak right now. Their testimonies are rooted in a belief that fuels them with positivity amidst despair and the anxiety attached to it. In his documentary, journalist Severino, those of you who have watched that, he says, marami na kaming lumalaban pero sa totoo, mag-isa mo itong haharapin. For some survivors, upon reflecting on the people and things they cherish most, the strength to move on comes from the divine whom they commune with personally. This is the spiritual remedy that fuels them to fight. It also made them promise a life of gratitude and service to everyone once healed. Excuse me. Armin Supnet, a medical doctor, she's a survivor also, says, quote, nagpaalam na ako sa family ko, sabi ko, ready na ako. May awa ang Diyos. improve talaga. Napansin ko gumaganda yung condition ko. Bawat araw, dumadaan sa treatment. Habang araw na dumadaan sa treatment, kaya sabi ko, kaya pa ito. Magiging sensitive ako sa feelings nila. She's referring to the patients. Mas hindi ko babaliwalain yung mga nararamdaman nila. Kasi naranasan ko po yung pinagdaanan nila. At mas babantayan ko pa sila. Higit sa dati kong pagbabantay. In Kierkegaard's prescription of faith, one need not be ethically religious. With this pandemic, you notice funerals are without rituals, done both by Christians and Muslims. But these are so sympathetic more than ever. For the fortunate ones, goodbyes are said through two-way radio or via FaceTime. Yet they are most heartfelt. Now, with all due respect, of course, all forms of death are earnest, but the pandemic made it enormously meaningful. The traditional worship of congregation has become obsolete as it turned into a solitary prayer before a television, in a laptop computer, or a smartphone. This one struck me most. Receiving Christ via spiritual communion is something than the usual reception in a church. Those who you have seen also the ceremony, the 2020 Easter celebration at St. Peter's Square makes the Pope, few cardinals, and selected camera crew out Christendom. I think faith here is indeed personal. This personal faith also opens up the world's perspective anew. In this pandemic, we fight by sitting idly on a couch. Washing hands, we realize frequently, is not at all difficult. Long distance, mga LDR, no, long distance communications are strengthened. Advanced countries are retreating and left behind, while developing countries, ironically, have become trailblazers. India, Vietnam flattened the curve with minimum deaths, whereas the United States and Singapore are struggling in control and suffering from the effects of a possible second wave or third wave. The healthcare sector becomes as important as that of the military budget. Schools and offices have become remote. Learning and meetings happen in the comfort of the living room, wearing shorts and floppy slippers. Stock markets and crude oil prices plummet, yet the local retailers and agriculture flourished. Major cities are left empty, making creatures of the wild cross the streets, including those extinct. Even the largest hole in the ozone layer over the Arctic completely healed. Here in the Philippines, the once coveted the capital being the center of finance and industry turned into a ground zero of contamination, proving once more that life in the provinces, albeit simple, is conducive for healthy living. Rich people are not at all immune to viruses, while the poor ones seemingly are more determined and stronger. All these life lessons are revealed to everyone in isolation. In Kierkegaardian epidemiology, faith is the opposite of despair. If this is correct, and this is my belief, faith in times of pandemic is a reset of the spirit, of the self, and perhaps the humanity. With that, good evening and thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Sir Rhochie. So, nadagdagan tayo ng some participants. I think Archie is already here. And also, Mike. Mike, nasan ka? Are you here, Mike?
Nandyan lang yan, Doc.
And we also have, sino pa ba yung mga bagong dating?
Congrats, Rhochie,
Thank you, Brother Mike.
Papa Rhochie.
Magaling yan, magaling yan.
Thank you sa Rhochie sa lecture.
Jan,
Only-
I miss you, Papa Rhochie.
Naligo pa yan, boss.
So we have here.
Sariwang
Congrats.
sariwa.
So if you
Congrats, sir.
have
Good job.
questions, so we are now
welcome,
open
welcome.
to your questions and inquiries. And I think Sir Rhochie is very
Kwentuhan tayo. Kwentuhan.
kwentuhan. Do you have any questions? Anyone? Please just raise your hand, and then you may also use the chat box if you have some questions.
Sige.
Chimi, tanong ako.
Sige, bro.
Yung Kierkegaardian repetition,
Aha.
kasi nung nag-talk din ako sa Party to State,
Mike?
parang yung tingin ko dun sa repetition, hello?
Can you
Okay
make
ba?
it in English? It's because Bill is
Repetition is a... Oh yeah, okay. Okay, I'll repeat it now. I was referring to Kierkegaardian repetition. Do you think it's a universal structure by which human beings can actually understand themselves in this present time? But something that's only amplified right now because there is this virus causing a pandemic. In other words,
Yeah.
what the virus basically reveals about ourselves is that we are all essentially bored from the start. And the virus actually only help us realize that.
Tama. Yeah. Yeah, I perfectly agree with that observation, no, that the repetition, boredom has been somehow amplified more than 3 times over because of the quarantine, pandemic, and so on. Yeah, that's very much true. No, I agree with you on that one. But you asked whether that one is something universal. Let me just sorry, some who are not actually well versed. I don't know how to put it in a more subtle way, but who are not familiar with the concept of repetition. Kierkegaard has this notion of repetition, wherein it seems like we do it again and again, to the point that we run out of options, and thereby we feel anxious, anxiety. His perfect example there in either or and repetition is Don Juan de Marco, the one who got 100 wives. He never slept in bed with the same girl, the same woman, because his idea is to have a new woman. So it has to be over and over and over again.
Kaya
Um,
pala favorite niyo siya.
no, but the point there is there will come a point,
Joke lang, joke.
there will come a point in time you will get used to it. Get used to it. And you feel bored. So that's the aesthetic level. Just to connect the aesthetic. Kierkegaard says there are 3 levels: no? Aesthetic, ano pa yung isa, ethical, and that of the religious. Now, with the repetitious doing of things, you will come to the point that you feel anxious. What is anxiety? Anxiety is a kind of fear which is unfocused. You don't know, but you're afraid. There will come a point in time in our lives that we're afraid, but we don't know what is it. Could be, they call it midlife crisis, paano ba, identity crisis, whatsoever. But the idea is 2 things. It can make or break you. It can make you to go to the higher level, which is the ethical stage, or make you stay at the level of aesthetic, which is boredom. So whether it is universal, uh, Kierkegaard is saying it is. We experience that constantly in our lives. It is common, just like despair. It's common to us, whether we know known or unknown. It's with us. We experience that. Um, but that's a good point. No, many have become aware because of the current situation we have now. Yeah, that's it.
Don't you think it is most shocking to know that even after the virus will be gone, we are all still bored. We will still be bored.
Definitely. I would recommend a movie. No, I shown this in my class whenever I discuss Kierkegaard take home movie. Ano bang title doon? Groundhog's Day, Bill Murray. It's exactly the one that you're referring to. It's a story of he always wake up at the same day over and over again. And whatever it is, he killed himself. He always wake up at 6 a.m. in the morning. Yeah,
Oo,
it's
napanood ko yun.
I agree with you. Definitely, we will go into another level of this new normal. Will also become the old, but it's always with us. It's always with us. And to connect your question to my paper, no, Kierkegaard is suggesting that the cure to that spiritual sickness of boredom would be faith. That's for Kierkegaard. That would be faith.
Okay,
Para
okay.
Thank you, Sir Mike. We have another question from Chris. Aside from faith, what would be, do you think would be, how can we make our life meaningful despite of this pandemic?
very good, no? It's a interesting question. Soren Kierkegaard is known as the father of existentialism precisely because he was a president to Sartre, Camus, and so on. But aside from faith, which is you see the bias, in fact, I put here a footnote on my paper. You will see the bias of Soren Kierkegaard is actually a Christian Protestant. Definitely, his ideas would be more Christian. There are also philosophers who followed the structure, the framework of Soren Kierkegaard, but disregarded the idea of God. So faith is not the answer. So we have Jean-Paul Sartre, Albert Camus, yeah, no? So these some who don't believe that there is God, but you will see they can also make life meaningful even without the idea of God. And that's where the basis is, that's where they share commonality between Soren Kierkegaard, a Christian theist philosopher, existentialist, the other one, Sartre, Camus, atheist. They share with the idea of freedom. When we have that freedom, that what makes us our lives meaningful, not conceptually, but in practice. I remember, sino yun, Mike? Si Father, nundagin mo, baby.
Periols.
Seryols.
Father Freos, no? It's
Seryols.
not enough that you have it in your mind, but you have to jump. You can watch how to swim. You can watch in YouTube how to swim, but unless you jump into the water, only then you will really know how to swim. That's the concept of freedom. The freedom is in the mind, but it's not meaningful unless you practice it, unless you do it in reality. And for those who don't believe that faith, what makes life meaningful, to them, that would be also a possibility to make our life meaningful. On freedom, they share their thoughts. Thank you. Is it Myra, Christine, who asked?
From
Thank you for
Chris. It's from
Chris. Thank you very much.
Okay, do you have any
Tetay,
questions?
tetay.
Uh, Hello, Ma'am Tetay.
You can use also your, okay. Sir, we have question from Learn. Good eve, sir. I would like to ask if what triggers Kierkegaard to write Sickness and to Death?
Uh-huh. Just a little backgrounder. Sickness unto Death is the six years before he died. That's when he published it. And he died very early. He's a young who died 44, but he died very young. His life is. I have a colleague. I don't know if she's there. She doesn't want her master's research is actually on Kierkegaard, but she doesn't want to go back there anymore because of this gloomy concepts with Soren Kierkegaard because of his own life. You can check it, Google or YouTube. You will see his dark background. In fact, he died and he was not blessed. His body was not blessed by the local church because of this attack against the church at that time, the Protestant church during his time. We have to understand also that Soren Kierkegaard is not the one who wrote Sickness unto Death. Yes and no. Don't be confused. Technically, he wrote it, but essentially he's not. It's Anticlimacus who wrote that. He make use of many pseudonyms. I don't know if you're still with me now, but that's the way he writes. There are many, hindi ko matandaan, ilan ba yun, Mike? 24 or 26?
Dami.
26
Dami ng pseudonym
pseudonyms
niya.
having different personalities, one against the other, an atheist, a poet, a philosopher, a logician, and so on. Marami. Anticlimacus is, the background is that there is, there's another one, Climacus, Johannes Climacus, if I'm not mistaken, and the other one is Anticlimacus. So accordingly, I was searching for the book, the history of the book itself. That is one of his most philosophical, uh, uh, closest to philosophical writings. Most of them are essays in literature, in poets, songs, and so on. Why is he writing that way? To go against the systematic, treatises, formalities, objective approach to spirituality. That is his battle cry. Spirituality is something private. It is something spiritual. It's subjective. It's passionate. It's inward. It's personal. So no one is to tell you, according to the book, according to this one, this should be your faith. So that is his idea. Now, why am I going with that long detour? Anticlimacus is he wrote 2 books on Kierkegaard, Practice in Christianity, Sickness unto Death. And what is the commonality of these things? They attack the formality of spirituality. They attack the local church. That is why he was, what do you call this one? He died. Nobody knows that even where he was buried. But when he is about to publish it, he was about to write his own name. Very few works that he make his own name written on it. But after minutes, I don't know, but suddenly he changed his mind and he put there Anticlimacus. Anticlimacus, ante, no, is one of the highest Christian thinker, believer of his pseudonymous authorship. The other one is Johannes Climacus. And according to Kierkegaard, these two are more Christian than the Christians. I don't know if you're getting me. They are not Christian themselves by religion, but by spirituality, by deeds, by works, by heart, by thoughts. They are Christians. And according to him, the highest Christian among those writers is, who call this one? Anticlimacus. And lastly, I'm sorry. He wanted that the book Sickness unto Death be different from the other books on spirituality, who some kind of formal. Kaya nga sabi niya sa introduction, the book is some kind of a doctor treating a patient, a doctor treating someone in bed. That should be a spiritual book, should be, and not something categorical, objective, and so on. Not logical. That push him, that inspire him to write this one. I think.
Okay, thank you, Sir Rhochie. We have 2 questions concerning faith. So one is from Sir Rex and the one is from Tresha. Sige, Sir Rex, you can just ask the question directly to Rhochie. You introduce yourself and also you from what institution? Your affiliated institution.
Hello, Boss Doc Rhochie. Baka paalala mo, nasa na si Hipag?
Maaga
pa. Sinong hipag yan?
Maaga pa, bayaw, pamira.
Anyway, ito lang naman, Doc. No? So, is faith here strictly
Dami yung alam, puta.
So, if yes, does that...
Ulit, Rex.
Ulitin ko. Is faith here strictly religious? If yes, does that mean that for Kierkegaard, those who have no such faith cannot resolve their personal instances of despair?
Okay,
yeah.
Sir Rhochie, meron pang isa concerning faith para anuhin na lang natin. Kay Tresha. Tresha?
Hello po.
hope I remember. Go ahead. Tresha, go ahead.
Okay po. Good evening po, sir. In the Kierkegaardian perspective po, if most of humanity is unaware of this spiritual despair, as you have mentioned earlier in your paper, how then can one develop his faith? Is faith vacuous, especially to those who are not really familiar or introduced to a spiritual level of faith, or haven't been, like, hindi pa talaga sila subscribe sa idea of religion or spirit.
Aha. Good thing, no? Tresha, your question is, if I got it correct, somehow it's connected with Sir Rex's question. Um, whether faith, you correct me, that you can still practice faith, the true faith, Kierkegaard is referring, even without religion. Is that what you're referring to again, Tresha?
That's the
Um,
question of Rex.
That's
what
just
I'm
for
trying to ano po, what I'm trying to point out is, di ba, kunya, in this time of pandemic, we are on isolation, so we are restricted of movement po. So hindi po wala tayong discovery of the religious domain of spirit, of spiritual despair. And then you mentioned earlier po na we are unaware of this spiritual despair. That's the problem. So how can one be able to develop his faith in this time of isolation?
Tresha, one of the battle cries I mentioned earlier, existentialism, particularly of Soren Kierkegaard, is freedom. Freedom. Soren Kierkegaard says in six, unfortunately, most of us experience despair. We all experience despair, especially in this time of my addition is especially during this time of pandemic. Now, what if they are not exposed? 2 points. One, I mentioned about freedom. Sabi ni Soren Kierkegaard, that's where you will come in as a human person. If you will see his definition here of man, nakakalito, I know, I'm sorry, but I have to present this. We are composed of a spirit and that of a material self. And the relation of the two is coming from someone, the power that settles the harmony of the two. If you don't, if you don't, if you don't actually, um, nawala tuloy ako dahil dun sa sunmig light ni Pangulo. If you tend to be confused with those, how
Kanina, red horse yan.
how are we going to commune the two? That's where despair is coming in. And that is exactly what we are observing now, what we are experiencing now. Bakit? We see in this pandemic all the things that we lost during the normal days. And as if tapos na ang lahat, tapos na everything is ended, the world has ended, and you're doomed. That's all what we see. But Kierkegaard is saying that you have to go over and beyond. How to do that? You practice your freedom. Nabanggit ni Sir Mike kanina, you can choose at this level or you can go to a higher level. It's your choice. And what is something in between? Anxiety. That awareness that I'm bored, I'm helpless, I have no choices. And that makes you move to the next level. You see the irony, dyan magaling si Soren Kierkegaard. So without us exposed to faith, no? You have a student, hindi nakakuha ng religion or what, hindi ka nakasimba ng church. The question is, how can they be guided in terms of spirituality? Now, there, it will push you to the limits. And that is actually the content, if I'm not mistaken, of the book called The Concept of Anxiety. Unfortunately, Sartre mentioned this also, the dizziness of freedom, That's anxiety, original of Soren Kierkegaard. Unfortunately, kakaunti ang nag-acknowledge, no? What is it? That when you stand at the peak, at the, what you call this one, at the edge of a building, something tells you a tremendous fear that makes you, I can fall. And then something tells you also that part of you is freedom. Because of that freedom, no, ang version ni Sartre there is that everywhere you go, dizziness of freedom. So going back with this time of pandemic, if you are at that level of punong-puno ka na and there's no turning back, two things. It can either make or break you. Either build up, edify your faith, or you go back and become who you are, numb, just accepting the things being dictated unto you. Do I make sense, Tresha?
Yes po. Pwede po pa follow-up
Teka
question.
lang, Tresha, ano yung question ni Rex muna, parang hindi na-address. Okay, the question of Rex is, teka lang, hanapin ko lang. Is faith here strictly religious? If yes, does that mean that for Kierkegaard, those who have no such faith cannot resolve their personal instances of despair?
Kay Soren Kierkegaard, to be specific, kay Anticlimacus, with this book, there are level of despair. And he also categorized a kind of despair experienced by the pagans, those who don't have religious, spirituality, Christianity. Meron levels din siya. No? Hindi ko na lang nalagay dito because it will be longer. That's one of the levels of despair. Wherein, according to him, they themselves also are experiencing despair of a different level. Now, that you will see also, many commentators have thrown that back to Soren Kierkegaard, especially Sickness Unto Death. That what if I'm not a Christian? What if I'm not experiencing despair? What if I'm in the comfort of my home? Wherever. So I'm not experiencing suffering and hardships because of this pandemic. Am I not having despair? Yan. This is now Soren Kierkegaard's. That's Anticlimacus' point. Now, for Soren Kierkegaard, the answer is very much yes, you can do faith even without religion. And that's actually what he is trying to portray in many of his works. Practice in Christianity, anong tawag dyan? Fear and Trembling, then that one, this one I presented, and that of, I forgot the other word, Attack Upon Christendom. Now, those things are actually against the established, formalized, institutionalized, rationalized religion. Yun yung pinakaayaw niya eh. So the faith is still possible. Faith is still possible. And those who are sensitive to this are those who are experiencing the tremendous degree, sorry for the words, I cannot find words to say, the utmost despair. Those who are having this feeling of extensive, too much despair are the ones closer to faith. Why am I saying this? Look at those I presented, the testimonies of the journalist who thought he was about to die, and he has nothing to hold on to but his faith. And according to him, mag-isa lang siyang lalaban, and he has faith in him. That's the reason why he was able to make it. And you see a lot of many interviews, they would always say that I kept my faith. I'm only alone there. Nobody can see me. Nobody can approach me, hug me, and so on. But it's you and you alone. And what is it with you? You are in despair. But with that despair, the paradox is you're able to see faith, clarity, enlightenedness, or whatever you call it. The thing is, it keeps you moving. Kierkegaard calls it faith. Yeah.
Okay, so another, from Sir Roel Nalam, I think this is in connection with faith, and you have answered it that faith is not strictly personal, right? So, but is there a way of coming up with a communal faith?
So let me clarify that one. Faith is strictly not personal. It's the other way around. It's strictly personal.
Yeah,
That's what we're trying to push here. Yan. His question is, ano yun? Whether faith
Whether is
possible
there a
with the
way of coming up with a communal faith?
Yeah. Maganda. That's a good question. Sir Roel, I'm with you because that's exactly the same question when I was presenting this in my dissertation long way back. No? That's the question asked to me by Father Mercado. I made a dissertation on Kierkegaard, which is individual, fond of particularity, singularity, and then what I did is to put it in Capo. And Capo faith is Nazarene, communal, Catholic, Oriental. Yun po yung tanong sa akin ni Father Mercado noon. This is not Kierkegaard, but for me, yeah, I think Kierkegaard also would agree with me, no? And I'm not sure. But communal faith might be possible, but I'm not saying, because there's no way we can measure that. But I know for sure that with the 12 million people doing that thing, what they do every January 9, at least one, I'm pretty sure with that they are fueled and passionate and driven by faith. Communal, I'm not pretty sure. It might be possible in other religions. It could be, but I'm not sure. But what I'm sure of is individually, there is someone, and there are numerous testimonies. I can send you my fieldwork interviews with that, and you can see yourself that what the faith that they are having are coming from within. It is something individual. In fact, we don't understand. We can't understand what they are going through. Even pregnant person going there, bringing the old one. Yun lang po. Thank
Okay.
you, Sir Ruben. I don't know if I make sense.
Thank you very much. There is another. Tresha, do you have follow-up question?
Yes po.
Only one.
So, kanina po.
Last one follow-up question.
Apo. So, kanina po, so we had that freedom whether to excel or to regress. So, does this mean po na freedom sustain faith, or faith can sustain itself? If we want to be maintained onto that level that we prefer to go to, so does that mean that we need freedom to sustain this faith that we have already achieved?
Freedom sustains faith.
Yes po.
These two are different categories, actually, different realms. So I think if I'm to ask your question, is freedom a necessary requirement towards faith? I would rather put it that way, no?
Yes.
But faith and freedom are two different entities. But you can only have faith unless you allow yourself to do so. Seen this years back, sabi nga, no, God cannot save you unless you allow Him so. Something like that, no? So you have to make a choice. And for Soren Kierkegaard, that choice must be abrupt, must be sudden, must be forceful, must be passionate, intense. Ganun siya, no? Medyo aktibo siya, no? Bibong bata. That's how he described faith. His perfect example there is Abraham in Fear and Trembling. That he doesn't know what's going on, but because of faith, I have to trust God that my child Isaac will still be saved. No matter what, I will kill Abraham, I will kill Isaac because that's what God commands me so. Who the hell in the world can understand such? That's faith for Soren Kierkegaard. And you can only understand that, you can only appropriate that incident if you have faith. And you can only do that by way of freedom. sabi nga, Father Freros, no, lundagin mo, baby. That's why it's the other version of leap of faith. You have to jump. Jump where? I don't know. Gano'ng kalalim? I don't know. Saan ka tatalon? I don't know. But the thing is, I have to jump because I trust.
Mhm.
And in return, God gave Abraham more than what he expected. And you can only do that. Tama ka, no? There must be freedom first. Bakit? St. Thomas Aquinas also have this, no? Merong conscience, no? Different kinds of conscience, uh, uh, wherein culpable, inculpable, something like that. You are given the truth, but you decided not to believe and follow the truth. It's gonna be your choice. So you cannot be saved unless you let God save you. It's a matter of choice.
Thank you,
Kaya
Dom.
galit siya sa organized, no, organized na religion. In fact, kasi ang nangyari sa kanila sa Denmark, ginawang batas yung Protestantism. Protestantism has become a national religion, and that's where he's coming from. That's his hugot, no? He doesn't want to be into this colloquial permeation of the Geist in history, as Hegel would propose. He's very much against with Hegel. Thank you, Tresha.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you
thank
very
you.
much. Alex, I think si Alex may question. Alex.
Okay, good evening. Yeah. Okay,
Hello.
good evening po, Doc.
Good evening.
Okay.
Ganda ng mic mo.
Ito po yung tanong ko. Thank you. Here's my question. Because napansin ko lang in your discussions that seemingly Kierkegaard is separating the physical despair to the spiritual despair. And this is my question. Usually, as human person, we always encounter the physical despair. And we also experiencing it. For example, in this time of pandemic, we experiencing physical despair. And seemingly only the spiritual despair that we experiencing. Likewise, as we see the discussions, the flow of discussion, it seems that Kierkegaard putting aside the physical despair and then giving importance to the spiritual despair. Why is it so, Doc? Since no, as normal person, we always encounter this physical despair, and from the physical despair, it affects the spiritual despair. Which usually for my understanding, no, pag sinabi nating physical despair, ito yung nararanasan ko, ang problema, kakapit ako sa Diyos. Kailangan kumapit. Parang, yes, as in my own interpretation, that's what it means to be in spiritual despair. Because yun ang takbuhan mo sa mga problema na nararanasan mo from the physical. So why is this so?
Alex,
Taking away the physical.
Alex, can you make it short? So your
Yeah.
question is...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not only. Well,
Alex,
that's all.
I get your point. No.
Yeah.
Soren Kierkegaard is not against material despair. What he is against is once this material despair becomes the all and be all despair of everything. Parang ganito, no? He is not against science, logic, technology. Anong tawag ni Dilsa dyan? Naturwissenschaften, no? He's not against those. What he is very much against with, kasi how can we push you without those material stuff, material things? I agree with you. Finances, how can you go without those? And Kierkegaard is also not against that. What he is much against with is once you explain the spiritual realm, which is something private, in a logical way, that what he is against with. Tipo bang, I'll give you a background. Going back in Copenhagen, in Denmark, the official framework of theology and philosophy is Hegel, and it has become a law. Denmark is just a very minority. The center of Europe was Berlin, Germany. So that's what happened. He is against with the technicalization, reification of faith. But he is not against if only those two are in their proper places. Like what we have now. We're nothing against with technology. Without technology, we cannot be having conversation like this. But you cannot eat anymore. You cannot go, you cannot meet and so on because you are always in front of your technology. That's the problem. That's where the problem comes in. Bicycle is good. Your bicycle is there. That's perfectly all right. But if you lose your touch with your family, faith, and so on, because you always focus on your bicycle, then that's where the problem comes in. That's where Kierkegaard is cautioning us. The material despair versus spiritual despair.
Okay, thank you very much. Bill, you have question?
Okay, I'll try. Years ago, I read two books by existentialists that are not necessarily coming from Christian background. One of them is Ernest Becker, who wrote a book called The Denial of Death, which he posits the primary source of anxiety of humans is the fact that we deny that we are animals that decay and die and hence are finite, but we have a mind that likes to live forever. And the source of anxiety is that lack of acceptance of that. Eric Fromm, on the other hand, posits escape from freedom as the primary source of anxiety. People who are desperate, the first thing they do is try to give away their freedom. Now, these are different perspectives from existentialist point of view, but it seems to me they posit a different view of faith. And in that case, a desperate person is willing to cling to anything to get them out of their desperation. And in that case, what might appear as faith is a wishful thinking, or maybe strongly more of an illusion that we have control. We have a meaning that comes from outside us. What would you say to these arguments?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. It's a wonderful question. In Sickness Unto Death, Soren Kierkegaard says that despair is worse than a physical death. His basis of saying that is that you can experience death even though you don't want it to. And that makes you forever, eternal, condemned. I think that one is in chapter 3, no? Chapter 3, he got no, subsection of chapter 2. Now, the point being is that even without the ultimate, somehow, the ultimate source of sin, that would be despair. And that makes you forever somehow damned in a way. Those ideas you mentioned as regards to another version of faith via denial of escape from freedom, and the other one, I'm sorry, I forgot. But somehow the idea of eternity, that we have to move on, even though there is no idea of fate there, but some kind of elan betal of Bergson, wherein you have to continue. For Soren Kierkegaard, we must understand that, one bias would be Christian. He's a Christian. but his somehow followers, somehow the later existentialists, also embrace that idea in a non-Christian way. Like, for example, I mentioned earlier, Sartre, or even that of Camus. Those experts here can help me in this one. Um, Faith is still possible, or the attempt to strive to have a life, a meaningful life, is still possible even without faith. Faith, I'm qualifying the term faith here as Christian. For example, if I am a astrophysicist and I consider my discovery, my work, my research as something divine for me, then there's a reason for me to move on and pushing me, giving me a reason also to exist, to continue living, which I think this is my life worth living. It's not fate, but this is a noble cause, and that keeps me and pushing me to perform and achieve a meaningful life, even without faith. So I agree with you. Those two thinkers you mentioned earlier, even though without mentioning faith, they also have idea of faith, but not, of course, faith. Now, let me clarify. Soren Kierkegaard defines faith in Fear and Trembling in three ways. It's passionate, it's innate, it's inner, coming from the inside. And the last thing I would like to emphasize, it's subjective. Subjectivity means for him, the faith is coming from you, regardless of what is it. I think that's where I am coming in. I will make use of that to somehow uh, address your question, that even if I have no concept of faith in Jesus, but I still also have this kind of faith which is subjective to me, I can still have a meaningful life in my own way. Now take note, it's not something relative. Relative is common, cultural, traditional based. But this one, subjective truth, is something that is in him alone. And my faith is true to me. I'm not saying this is true to you, but this is true only for me. And that makes my life meaningful. Again, going back to Abraham. What makes Abraham the father of faith? Because he believed only with God and himself without actually considering the laws, the ethics on those days. That's why there's a term, teleological principle. I'm sorry, suspension of the teleologicals. You suspend the ethics, you suspend the telos. Because if you always have that telos, it will always bring you to an end, and it seems to be fixed. And life is more than objectification, reification. It's beyond. It's the essence of man is freedom. Kaya nga sabi niya, that's why he mentioned in his definition of man, because of that, man is in a project. It's not finished yet. You are still on the process of doing that. So again, subjectivity, faith is possible even on those versions that you have mentioned. So I think the other question, the other version, if I am to ask your question, if I get it right, is that um, can I still survive? Can I still be saved even without faith in God? And Kierkegaard would say yes, because subjectively speaking, we can still move on for some reasons that is only true to you. And that makes you continue, motivate, and drive for some more, search for truth, whatever that is. Truth is subjectivity, and subjectivity is the truth, according to Kierkegaard.
Um, I take that point of subjectivity. I think it's a good point, but I'm not sure that what Ernest Becker is talking about, denial of death and escape from freedom, from Eric Fromm, can be called faith. It is more acceptance of the reasons of the despair rather than faith, which is indicate that there is something outside and beyond that can save me. I'm not sure.
That's
That's interesting.
that's a good point. In fact, it's not only um, on that book it's mentioned. Sartre also mentioned that Heidegger also got this being in the world stuff. And Soren Kierkegaard is also aware that there are things that we cannot actually change in this world. So the thing that we have to do is how to approach it, and that's correct, Bill. Acceptance is one way of appropriating the truth. The facticity of things. How can I practice my freedom if this big boulder is in front of me? You see, the thing I have to do is to accept it, embrace it, and from there, Mike is explaining earlier, repetition. Once I do that over and over again, something will come out as a somehow an idea, a eureka moment that these things that I cannot control, there is meaning actually behind these things. I don't know if I make sense, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
Okay.
Very well done.
Sir Rhochie, there is another question. I think this one. Question by yes, sir. Sir, yes, sir. Are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sige.
Yes,
Tatlo
sir.
yung tanong ko dito eh. Naipon na.
Ah,
Sensya ako.
pwede namang follow-up question but you just make it short.
Since nasagot naman na po ata yung isa kasi
Yeah.
yung una ko kasi tanong, okay na ito, pangalawa na lang muna. Sir, ito na lang po.
Go ahead po.
Ito po bang leap of faith? Leap of faith is some sort of bahala na nga. Yan. Which suddenly letting yourself toward it until it's done.
Siguro po, yeah, sir, maybe your question is addressed to Mike. Mike, you remember I don't know if it is in your journal, I published the Bahala Na as a manifestation of leap of faith. I think, yes, sir. I have that published sometime, but I can email it to you. Exactly the answer to your question. No? Bahala Na in the Filipino sense is a historical.
Kasi yung kay Abraham, yung ginawa ni Abraham, sige, bahala na kung anong kalalabasan.
Very much so. But the term bahala na, I clarified there in my first chapters, it has also some historical, geographical connotation, like it was the Muslims in the 12th century who mentioned the Bathala, the term Bathala of the pre-ancient, prehistoric Filipinos, god of kabunian of the Bathala, no? The fatalism of Islamic people who came from 12th, 13th century. Now, I think it's a what do you call this one? It's a long shot, but I tried to prove there that the bahala na can also be an interpretation of leap of faith in that sense. And then I went back again examples, the testimonies coming from the Quiapo people who says, bahala na si Nazareno. I can be killed by what I'm doing, but bahala na. I entrust my fate to you. I agree with you if that is your notion of bahala na, in that context of Kierkegaard. Yeah. In fact, I have written something about it.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Meron pang isang follow-up eh.
Okay, sige.
Bali tatlo yun.
Okay, sige. Last one. Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Why does this faith pushes us always to the material and spiritual limitations or sufferings of ourselves or the self?
Why is the faith keeps on pushing us?
Yes, sir. Why does this faith pushes us always to the material and spiritual limitations or sufferings of ourselves or the self?
Or can we say transcends? Yes, sir. Not just spiritual limitations. Because of this spiritual limitation, this kind of faith transcends us.
Yeah, there are many terms here to clarify, no? But if I'm getting you correct, Mr. Yes, sir, I would like to inquiries on the terms like despair, spiritual material, spiritual Yeah, religion,
Maybe
spiritual. These are
Rhochie is
yeah.
trying to question about the problem of transcendence. Ano? It has something to do with because of our spiritual and material limitation, or maybe suffering of ourselves or the self.
One, I would go back. I'll try to answer it in two ways. One, um, on sickness and to death, not only Kierkegaard, but I told you already, ancient medieval philosophers have mentioned already of this dichotomy between the body and the soul. So naturally, spirituality is somehow belonging to the realms of the soul, of the spiritual side of the person. Now, as regards to the material suffering, um, Soren Kierkegaard has a very extensive writings on sufferings. You can check the practice in Christianity. He was saying that true Christians, through faith, no, are those people of the early Christianity. Why did he say that? Because during those days, those who are practicing Christianity, practicing spirituality of Christianity, are being persecuted. They hold commemoration of the Last Supper under the caves on this hidden. Otherwise, they will be killed. Now, according to Kierkegaard, this is the true sense of Christianity. Why? Look at us now. It's also in Sickness unto Death. There is what we call Sunday Christianity. That because we enter, we hold mass one day in a week, we can be saved already. So he is more onto suffering. He is more onto a kind of faith which is promulgated by suffering, a fruition of suffering. Because in doing so, we can ascertain that our faith is true, genuine. Kaya nga again, what is definition of his faith? Passionate, no, inward and subjective. So passionate, inward. So something that you have to work hard for, and you can suffer. I don't know if it is in Suri or in a journal of Sir Mike. I put there Hermano Puli's it's a cult in the 19th century, and then these people are actually being persecuted. And I try to read that in the lens of Soren Kierkegaard's idea of suffering, faith and suffering. And I tried to prove there, insist there, that this kind of faith is authentic, and this kind of faith, in the eyes of the many, are cult, evil doers, evil workers, and so on. But that is actually one of the finest, no, version, if I may say, of faith, which is defined by suffering. So we are always pushed to that in order for us to transcend, if that is your question. Yes, it's always like that. Last thing, Pangulo, no, let me just allow me. Soren Kierkegaard is against Hegel, who says that there's a thesis. What's the other one? Thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Is very much against that. But you will see also the dialectic, the process, he also borrowed. He had inculcated it in most of his works. And look at the definition kanina of it's a synthesis. So in the same manner, a human person need to be in a dialectical, it's not always straightforward that this is your faith, this is what theology tells us, then that's it. We say amen, amen, I accept. No, you have to fight for it. You even have to go against it in order for you to really get what is the essence of that thing. In doing so, you go beyond, you transcend from those limits that setting us temporal or religiously, technical, objective, educational, whatsoever.
Okay?
Sir Rhochie, can I push the question further? Okay
Okay.
na, Rod?
Sige, sige.
Bating ko lang. Okay, siguro yung logical issue arising from what you said about the certain irrationality of faith, is there a way, at least for Kierkegaard, to distinguish between, mass hysteria or collective paranoia from what is called authentically religious?
Uh-huh.
See, the tendency is to, if I insist on a certain subjectivity of truth as the only way to measure what is true, I mean, does that not fall back into a certain kind of, parang psychological subjectivism lang?
It's a very
Solipsism.
valid question, Mike. No, um, it's another way of saying leap of faith. Then I can do whatever I want. I can bomb Malacanang. I can
The, the,
bomb.
the, the, the Abrahamic variety, actually si Derrida, binanatan niya to sa gift of death, di ba?
Yeah. Um, Now we must understand that Soren Kierkegaard proposes three levels of existence. There is aesthetic, ruled by the senses. Yung si Juan de Marco, no? The one who had 100 wives. And then by repetition and boredom, it will bring you to the next level. Anxiety, yung sinasabi kanina ni Yasser, transcendence. You go to the ethical stage. The ethical stage is ruled by reason. And the hero here is Socrates. And then, even if you do good things, you will end up with some anxiety. Like nowadays, gumawa ka ng tama, ikaw ang masama. Now, this will bring you to another dilemma. And this, he call it existential crisis, another anxiety. This will bring you to the another edge. And that edge is now you are to jump. And that's where irrationality comes in. Now, going back to your question, can it be just a mass hysteria or hallucination? Now, because of those levels, we can say that before you can reach that level, the religious stage, there is an ethical stage that somehow purify your thoughts, purify your actions. So we cannot say that it's a whimsical thing. How we will know that? Soren Kierkegaard does not give us the measure, the exact measure. How which is
Actually, yeah, very good answer kasi I asked that because some people might interpret Kierkegaard as some kind of lunatic asking you to just trust, what faith, and then you kill everybody else, di ba? Suicide bomber, etc., etc.
how I address the
Another
question.
Mike is not just lunatic, but the question is maybe some would say that Kierkegaard is also promoting relativism.
No, I don't think so. Kasi actually in Derrida, sa Gift of Death, he brought this precise topic of Abrahamic faith, which Kierkegaard discusses as a religious from what is a collective paranoia, and what's the marker? What's that standpoint? That's responsibility for the other. So in other words, you pass from being a cultic follower into the authentically religious once the ethical responsibility has been subsumed into the act of the person. So you cannot basically say na, okay, naniniwala ako sa Diyos and then I bump everybody. No, I mean, there's at least a criteria. I mentioned this one because some people might interpret Kierkegaard as saying na, okay, tangina, leap of faith ako, pak, yun na yung gagawin ko na yung trip ko. No. There is this very clear sense of responsibility that you have to take into account in Kierkegaard. And Derrida does a very good way of discussing that in his book.
But can we say, maybe Mike and also Rhochie, can we say, because I'm trying to read Kierkegaard in the perspective of, what do you call that, the Kohlberg's, okay, ethical, particularly the pre-conventional, conventional, and the post-conventional stage. So I'm trying to trying to compare it, by looking into, because as we're going to revisit, for example, Lawrence Kohlberg's ethical reasoning on the post-conventional stage, it seems to be very unclear, right? And I'm trying to look at the possibility that maybe Kierkegaard and Lawrence Kohlberg is saying the same thing as far as that kind of stages is concerned.
It could be. Soren Kierkegaard, you will see also, uh, is one of the somehow germination principles of psychology. Angst, anxiety, dread, those words actually somehow, even though on those days have no distinction yet. Right? Just like here in the Philippines, you remember before when somebody goes to a psychiatrist, baliw yan. But nowadays, there are levels, depression, anxiety, and so on. Uh, but during his time, once you go into an asylum, you're baliw. Sino yan? Bango and the rest. The stigma is already there. Um, but with regard to the stages, what I'm saying, why did I point those things out? It's because the stages are actually well developed years later on, no? And then you will see some have different versions, Eric Erikson and so on. Ang gaganda nung kanilang mga nabanggit, no? It's highly possible. Yes, I agree. But it's a limitation of Soren Kierkegaard also that he is more into. Yasser was saying earlier, why is he biased always in the on the spiritual side? And I agree with that. That is he might also have some levels, but he is more concerned with the spiritual authorship of him. In fact, nag-break sila, no, with Regina Olsen, and they were engaged already, and they broke up because according to him, he has a vocation towards being a religious author. So that's how passionate he is. Hindi na nag-asawa because he wanted to be into spiritual direction and so on. So he's more into that. But there's a similarity as regards to those stages and the other psychologists as well.
Okay, so do you have any questions? Sir Harvey, yes?
Sir Rhochie, itanong ko lang po, meron bang solipsism sa philosophy ni Kierkegaard?
There are, I'm sorry, I cannot give you right now the names of those who have thrown commentaries on him on solipsism. But there are actually many who have thrown such accusation against him. But I would say the solipsism is more on the existence, ontological existence of the self, somehow a proof on the ontologicality of the self. Another area of solipsism is on epistemology. On epistemology, that we only know things if once we have understood that the ego exists first. So that's Descartes, no? Solipsism. Now, mind you that Soren Kierkegaard is less interested with the ontologicality of things. In fact, the term existence there is not the same with the ens ase of Thomas Aquinas and company, because it is more on a meaningful existence. So there's a difference between exist and existing, something like that. He's saying that my existence is not yet finished. I am still in the process of doing it. So in short way of saying, he is not to define truth. He is to give meaning to the truth. Solipsism does the earlier part. Solipsism is more on the proving on the ontologicality of the self. Solipsism is more on the capacity of a person to know epistemological sense. So in Kierkegaard, medyo he doesn't want, allergic siya dun sa mga terms na yun because for him, he is more into subjectivity, he's more into inwardness, into passion, more on life. Yan. So having a person is unsit, quidsit, existence is not his concern anymore. But how to make your life full, meaningful. In Sickness Unto Death, sabi niya, our life can be full once we actually have acknowledged that synthesis between the self, relating to the self, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, for him, it ends up with God. And that's how it can only be self-actualized. So he's not anymore concerned with solipsism, but he's more on concern of subjectivism. I would say it.
Subjectivism.
I think.
Can I have follow-up question?
Oh,
No.
sige, last one, sir. Last one.
Last one. If Kierkegaard is referring about leap of faith, did he mention actually yung faith na yun is towards Christ? Since I think he's a theologian also. Or it's just a matter of, kasi there's a distinction between philosophy and theology that time and until now. So is he more on the realization of the physical despair towards that spiritual despair, or it's just an explicitation of his philosophical framework?
You mentioned there faith towards Christ. Do I hear it correct? That part
Apo. Apo.
you're asking whether his notion of faith is directed to Christ.
Yes. Theology na yun, di ba?
Okay.
Kasi he is also a Protestant. I think he is a Protestant, let's say, theologian. Yeah.
You will see if you are a Protestant, solo fides. You see that's Isaac. Faith alone can save. You see now where he's coming from.
Because he's more of against the herding.
Precisely, and institutionalization of reification of faith. Yes, it's very much correct. That's why he is also considered, if you try to Google Soren Kierkegaard, he belongs to the negative theologian. He's belonging to the negative theologian. But he hates theology, I'm sorry, during his early part, because his father wants him to be a priest and a bishop someday, just like his brother. And in retaliation, he just took it. But he's more when he was doing theology, he was more concerned with literature, philosophy, theater arts. Lagi siya sa mga cafe, and theater arts.
Lalim ng sulat niya
Yeah, but makita mo, he is actually against the theologians of his time, because their theology is flavored by Hegelian permeation of the Geist, because on those days, that was the law, that philosophy and theology must be centered. Prussian Frederick the Seventh, I guess, was the king that time. He was so fascinated with German idealism of Hegel. So geographical, political, philosophical, on those days, they were politicized. And he was in a minority. Soren Kierkegaard was even written in Danish. And lately lang, he neglected thinker. Even up to now, no, I was in Prague, I guess. Hegel pa din, no? When you present things, they keep on saying Hegel and Hegel and Hegel. Until now, Hegel yung kanilang pinag-usapan. Nothing against with Hegel, but the thing is, just like Soren Kierkegaard, he got suffocated with the theology, with the kind of theology that is sugar-coated by Hegelianism. That's why he appears to be a negative theologian, but he is more on a theologian of subjectivity, if I put it in my terms. It's possible that nowadays, popular religiosity before was not even taught in theology, but today is one of the core subjects in theology. So what are these things? These are based on subjectivity. And some call it relativism, pero valid na theology approach. Yeah.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc Rod.
Thank you.
Okay, Sir Rhochie, there's another question. Sir John Kahambing. Yes.
Go ahead, Sir John.
Sir John? Okay, kung hindi, so ito yung question niya. Can the 3 stages of life be reversed?
Be reversed. In a Kierkegaardian sense, no. I personally say no.
But based on your field work, sir, because I think some of your studies about Kierkegaard is you try to make a validation out of your field work, right?
even themselves, you can say that, and then you can see this a lot in many testimonies. Most of most of them are belonging to the, how you call it? It's politically incorrect when you say the poor ones. The majority of those who are joining are belonging. They are less privileged. Yan. And upon having interviews, most of them are actually hiwalay. Most of them are drunkards. No? Most of them are even pickpocketers. No? And you see the subjectivity there. Even these people who have underwent in this level of stage we call aesthetic. Of course, I'm not to judge. I have no authority to judge. Wait, what you're doing is an aesthetic stage. I don't know exactly. You cannot get the history in a 15, 30-minute, 45-minute interview with them. But you can somehow deduce that they have come from life of just like Kierkegaard, no? He's a man of cafeteria and chatter arts and so on, and then later on went into some kind of awakening, and then eventually spiritual awakening. Mind you also that even at the level of religious stage, tatlo kasi yan eh. Soren Kierkegaard also differentiated two kinds of religiosity. May tinatawag na religious A and religious B. Religious A are those religious but on a level of categories. Siguro ito yung Sunday Christianity. Religious B is that level of faith that is subjective, Abrahamic, no, so to speak. How to pinpoint which is which? There's no way we can find it. There's no way we can understand it. But that's unfortunately only the self can understand itself.
Okay, so I think since you are doing field work, right, and you are trying to validate,
that was
right? So maybe you can take a look at the seminary life, di ba? Parang it seems that you entered the seminary life that as if you are into a religious stage. But how about those who went out? What happened to them? Maybe there is some kind of reversal.
Tanong natin kay Doc Mike.
Di ba, Sir Rex?
Baka nga yun ang religion. They got tired, they got sick and tired with the life of the seminar. When they went out, they discovered the faith. It's possible. It's possible. It's very possible. Pero
Okay.
I have seminarians na talking about the stages, thesis. They wrote on that one. I just forgot their conclusions, but I've read so many papers, thesis on Kierkegaard vis-a-vis seminary life. Yan.
Okay, Sir Jed. Naka-mute ka, Sir Jed.
Ayan po. Am I audible po?
Welcome, Jed. Yeah.
Okay po. So, good evening po everyone. Good evening, Doc Rhochie. My question po is, wala pong kinalaman po dun sa paper niyo po kanina, but this question is with regards for my plant thesis kasi this school year po kasi mag-thesis na po ako. So, question lang po. Does Soren Kierkegaard has a notion of the self? Or if so, then kindly please explain para po maintindihan.
I think that's your job as a researcher. He got, of course, definitely notion of the self. In fact, many times over, he is more using the term self rather than man. This is in order for him to distinguish himself from this school of thought that talks about man, humanity as an essence fixed. For him, he would like to prefer to talk about a human person, individual. Now, there is a chapter there in concluding unscientific postscript. It's a very long work, and there's a very lengthy chapter there. You know the title? The title is to the individual, the singular individual. You see, it's singular na, individual pa. Now, what's the point here? The idea the self alone, because the self is more closer to truth than the truth invented, prefabricated with our uh, definition of man is a rational animal. Even though you don't have kids yet, your kids in the future are already fixed, are already predetermined that they are rational animals. They already have essence. No, but Soren Kierkegaard is saying the self is about to create, to make its own essence. We are in a project of making ourselves. We are not to define man here, according to Kierkegaard. We are to give meaning to the self. I think that there's more to that. Of course, it's injustice to Soren Kierkegaard to sum his idea of self into that. But I think that's your job as a researcher. No, but definitely he's more into the self. In fact, um, the problem now of yours is, if I am your advisor, there might be what you call this one, preponderance of thesis talking about self on Kierkegaard. Maybe you should add something there to make it distinct from the rest of those who have written already on the self. That's my advice to you, Jed. Yeah.
So, you mean, ibig nyo po bang sabihin is that, ano pong to add more another stuff, or ano
bang favorite mo? What is your preoccupation now? Then you can relate to that. Baka there's something.
Payo ko dyan, kuhanin mong advisor si Rhochie.
Bala ko nga po sa kasi
Mawatak.
Pangalan ni Rhochie, hindi Rocky.
Kasi po yung thesis ko, yung
volunteering. No, but seriously, there are many angles you can talk about self on Soren Kierkegaard.
What about po? Okay po. So, what about po, kasi ang nakalagay po dun sa paper, parang di pa naman po fix daw yung title ng maayos. Pero ang gusto ko pong i-point out dun is that yung para bang meditative self, reflective self, does he have that kind of notion of the self?
You have to define perhaps meditative, reflective. Is it in an epistemological way? Is it in an existential way? You have to clarify the terms there. In an existential way, I think the reflection, if you want to do the reflective self there, I think you should go to Gabriel Marcel. He has a notable work on the self, on reflection, I guess, which can help you more. Wherein you can realize, kung baga, Soren Kierkegaard, how to approach life by way of freedom. Marcel, if I'm not mistaken, would say you can appropriate life by reflecting it and by doing what you have reflected upon it. Yan. And he's an existentialist also. You will also see the framework going back to Soren Kierkegaard, which is the reflection there is not something epistemological, not formal, yan, but it's more real. By the way, idol ni Soren Kierkegaard si Socrates. And if you look at Socrates, who talks about reflection, no, of the self, knowing thyself, is very much influenced by Socrates. I think that's where he got those terms on introspection, inwardness, and so on. It's more on Socrates. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe genealogy of self, no, from Socrates down to Marcel, no. But I doubt you can finish that in 1 year, no. Anyway, yeah. I'm
okay,
sorry.
So, there's another inquiry by Bill. Okay, it's about your field work. Okay. Can you say about that? I think you have done a lot of field work in order to validate.
Banahaw.
Yeah. Can you tell about something about that?
My experience to that is I was criticized a lot because way back 2015, my time, doing philosophy is more on, yeah, pure philosophy, philosophizing. I got tired. I got bored with that kind of pure philosophy. What I've done is do philosophy and then jump. And I made it by way of leap of faith. I don't know what will happen next. I jumped to other fields. I jumped to anthropology, to history, culture, sociology. I end up with popular religiosity. I was with Rod in, ano yung pinuntahan natin?
Sa Mount Balahaw, dami eh.
Balahaw and those group of mahaba, no? Solo.
Mystica and yeah.
And so on. I told you I was criticized a lot because on those days, until now, many of us, let's be true to ourselves. Until now, it's my personal conviction that when you do things like that, it's not philosophy. That's what how they treat me for so many years. And now I'm grateful that many are doing also this field work in philosophy. No? And in other countries, it's not new. But in our country, it seems that philosophy belongs only to the cerebral and so on. So I think that's where I'm coming from when I did field work. And I am not falsifying what the other fields have already discovered onto a particular phenomena. What I wanted to show is there might be other avenues to interpret the phenomena. There might be other layers that they haven't seen. I'm not discarding them, but I am adding a philosophical interpretation towards a phenomena. I've written on jeepney. I've written on hayop. We were in UP then, Mike, no, Rod, philosophy, kahayupan, and so on. What I'm doing is actually doing philosophy across across discipline. And I think, yeah, I'm criticized. I know I'm being laughed at. I know, but I think that's also a wonderful way of philosophizing, and even reaching a wide array of non-philosophy people thinking philosophy. And I think that's actually what we want to do. Philosophers, no, not necessarily change the world, but somehow contribute how they see the world.
Okay, thank you very much, Sir Rhochie. So by the way, I would like to inform the group that this group Tasyo series is an informal discussions webinar. So it's because real scholarism happens here. So in an informal way. So we don't have any certificate. It's because there will be some who will be emailing me about their certificate. But sooner or later, we're going to try our best to have our formal online philosophy conference. I might organize a online philosophy conference maybe on July. So we just wait for that. And we now end our formal discussions. If you still wanted to stay, you can stay. And pero siguro before that, can we have another picture taking? It's because kanina Sir Archie and Sir Mike is not here. So, sige, picture taking. Can we have our video on? Pero hindi to sa pilitan ha. Okay lang na if it is off. You have all the freedom. But you can have your leap of faith. Sige. I'm just going to count 1 to 5, and then if you don't want to video it on, it's okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so sige, lang natin, 1, okay, 2, 3. Okay, there's another one, another batch. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so for those who wanted to sleep, so pwede na pong you may leave.
Take a good rest.
Okay, but if you wanted to stay, So we can reverse it to go to the aesthetic stage.
Beyond the aesthetics.
All right.
Hipag, thank you,
Thank you very
Hipag.
much, Sir Rhochie. Sir, thank you very much for this wonderful talk.
Yeah, thank you, Rhochie.
Thank you, Sir Rhochie.
Bill, thank you.
Thank you, Sir Rhochie.
Thank you, Sir Rhochie.
Tama na, ano ba alak nyo dyan?
A nice
Thank
discussion.
you, sir.
Can we have
Thank you, Sir Rhochie.
your wine there? I'm seeing someone that they have their leap of faith that there will be untaxinated with their water. Just like Sir
Wala, sir. Wala, sir. Milk sa akin, sir. Milk.
Lalabas ko na yung beer ko.
Oh, Sir Rex. Sana all.
Cheers. Cheers.
Sana all, Sir Rex.
Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers.
Sir Rex, lasing na.
Cheers sa mga
Lasing si Sir Rex.
single.
Marami na si Rex ah.
Nakaligo na si Hipag, Sir
Aldrin,
Rhochie.
si Aldrin, wala na ba?
Bibigla ako na doon
Hindi
yung...
ko alam kung umalis na si Aldrin. Parang umalis na. Aldrin, nandito ka pa?
Babalik ako ah. Pangulo, babalik ako. Bababa ako.
Sige, sige. Parang wala si Aldrin. Umalis na. Ang bilis si Aldrin.
Cheers po.
Thank you, Sir Rodrigo. Good night.
Sige,
Hanap
sige.
ng asawa eh. Hello, Bill. Thank you, Bill.
Hello there. Who is this?
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Bill, you met
Yes,
already
okay.
Mike in Naga. Do you still remember when you were in Naga when we have a conference? And
Oo na, nag-usap na kami last time. Wala ka kasi last
Again,
time.
yes. Where are you stationed again?
Come again.
Where
Come again,
are you?
Come again, Bill.
Where are you?
I'm in Naga right now. Naga City in Bicol.
Oh, Naga, right.
You were here in
Yes.
2018, right?
Yes.
We met
It's
in Naga.
One of my favorite cities in the Philippines.
Wow, thank you.
I
Thank you.
always say I
Come
want to
to Naga.
retire. I want to retire there.
Oh yeah, nice. Yeah, it's very nice here. You know, there are hot springs, and then you have the city, but at the same time you also have the countryside. No,
Yeah.
so Naga is a city with a countryside, not like Manila. You have the city, and everything is a city. It's a hell.
Populated
We
city.
went. What's the name of that mountain near there?
Isarog.
Is that all?
Yes, Isarog.
Yeah. We had a picnic there. It was wonderful.
Did you go to the hot spring?
Well, we saw them. We didn't. We weren't prepared to dip in the water, but we did see them.
Well, you were not able to meet my guests from Australia at that time. Paul Patton and company. They enjoyed the hot springs very
Who
much.
was this? Who was?
Paul. Paul is from University of UNSW, New South Wales.
Oh, New South Wales. Yeah. All right. In philosophy, right?
But
Yeah, and
there,
then
when
they
we
went
have
to the
our
hot
tasting,
spring.
Mike, in the bar.
Oh.
I think Paul is not there, right?
No. He was with the other plenary speakers from Japan, and they were on
Okay.
another. But they enjoyed Naga a lot, no? So
Yeah. No, it's lovely. It has a very unique character. We've been to few places that are very bohemian type, and I felt really good about the whole place.
Naga, a very bohemian place.
Why didn't you bring us there, Mike?
No, because I don't know those places. I will only bring you to the churches and the nature place. But
There was a lovely coffee shop owned by, I think he's an accountant, and he lives upstairs, and downstairs he opened as a coffee shop, and he asked all his friends to bring their furniture. So they brought tables and chairs and cushions and couches, and no two items look the same. And then they came and all painted parts of the wall. So the whole place looks like an art gallery. And it was just wonderful.
I haven't been to that place.
I don't know what it's called, a small coffee shop. A friend took me there. And there was a beautiful Spanish restaurant opposite the cathedral, if I'm not mistaken.
¿Qué pasa? ¿Qué pasa?
¿Qué pasa? ¿Qué pasa? That was just lovely.
Sí.
Yeah, no, I had
El
a lot of fun.
nombre es en español. Se llama español.
No, it's wonderful.
The name was in Spanish. Sí.
What university do you work at again?
Ateneo Dinaga.
Ateneo, right. Yeah. Yeah, we passed there. What's the name of the private university there? There's another
Santa Isabel also, and Nueva Cáceres.
Oh, okay, that one, yes. I have a friend of mine who teaches there. So is there a lot of collaboration between the universities?
All right now, actually, as of this moment, if you're familiar with the CHED training for this online flexi training, so
right.
Ateneo, UNC, and USI, and UNEP from Iriga City are tasked to basically transform the courses into modules, and these modules will be communicated to teachers. So right now we're starting, and we're actually into a lot of work because we are actually on the trainers training stage, you know.
Yes.
And it's quite a lot of job because right now I should be doing some assignments, because rationality for online. But these are things that we have been doing for quite some time already, no?
Right. What subjects are you involved in? Philosophy subjects?
No, I'm doing philosophy, but my co-trainers were also focusing also on their fields. No? So we're talking here about the whole system being turned into modules. So all the subjects will have their own trainers. I will be teaching philosophy and understanding the self. So,
okay.
We'll be transforming them into modules, actually. And this will become, this is done basically in the whole Philippines. I just don't know which schools are pioneering for the process in Manila, in Region 4 and the other regions. Maybe Rex also will be part of it too. I mean, maybe some of you will be part. PNU, I suppose, should also be at the helm, because it's the premier school for education. So the facilitators were actually from education. So
I'm interested in that concept of a module. Everybody's talking about it in basic education. What is the basic understanding of a module? What is a module?
Well, basically, usually before, right, we do the face-to-face classes. You do it for a semester, right?
Right.
But when you do it in modules, students have the possibility of doing the course asynchronous, in different times. Right. Because during pre-COVID, we were like having all students, take the course at the same time, right? But with modules, there's the option, there's the possibility of you being faster or being slower, depending basically on your personal situation. So the teacher basically grades you on the outcomes. No, if you're able to do the outcomes at a certain period of time, then you proceed to the next one. That's the point. So, but
it's a mode of presentation of the material. more than pedagogy. It's more like just different pedagogy where you have material and students work
Yeah,
on it.
yeah.
Okay, okay. Because sometimes it is
Yeah, for
used.
example, yes.
Sometimes I feel it is used the same way we talk about flexible delivery or flexible. It's the same. It's not an alternative way to flexible delivery, is it?
Bill, I think this is the case. We're going to have the module is actually being used as a kind of textbook in the universities.
Okay.
And I really don't know why universities are still asking why there will be still a modular approach, but there's already an available module on the universities because it's a lot of money in the university, and they are asking students to buy these modules. It's because they are selling it, and they are answering activities and etc. And now the question is whether they can going to give it for free.
Right. So basically, the module is print.
Uh, it depends. I don't know. It can be also print. It can be also online. As you know, online is static rather than print, right?
No,
So,
I think it's gonna be free for everybody, but I think the general idea is that you are being asked to simplify the course, no? Instead of like doing it for 18 weeks during a regular semester.
Okay.
You can basically like compress it. No? So you are redesigning the how you do the class, but content wise it's just the same. No, the objectives, the outcomes are also the same. No, the objectives. So it is just